Welcome to the Reality Check. Psychosis is real, so is recovery podcast.
I'm Dr. Ashley Weiss. I'm a child adolescent psychiatrist.
And I'm Serena Chaudhry. I'm a clinical social worker.
And we are the co-founders of Epic NOLA, which is an early psychosis intervention clinic in New Orleans, and also the co-founders of Calm, Clear Answers to Louisiana Mental Health.
All right. I'm so happy we're here today with Tripp Friedler, who is the author of the book, The Tunnel. He's become a friend, and he is the father of a former patient at the Early Psychosis Intervention Clinic. And we're really grateful for you to be here with us today, Tripp, especially this week, the anniversary of this passing.
It's thank you. It was very tough on Heidi. I'm a caveman, so I had sort of dates don't really mean much to me. So I was unaware, but I was quickly made aware by my wife, who was in a mood.
Yeah,
so, it's every day is tough. So
right, I know that. I imagine one day doesn't necessarily stand out more significantly than the other, but all that to acknowledge that this week is, and to remember Henry. So we wanted to start by having you read a passage from The Tunnel so that our listeners can hear, and then read the book.
Okay, so I'm going to read, I'm coming in, this is his first manic episode. He had taken mescaline, and this is after this is 24, well, almost 48 hours after the mescaline. So, clearly it should not still be affecting him. And so and he had just gone to see my therapist, to explain to him how crazy I was. So, I'm going to read this. I hung up with Andre and immediately called Henry's friend, John, who I knew better than Steve. John told me that they had indeed ordered the mescaline online and that he and Steve had a normal psychedelic experience and had come down from their high. John was concerned about Henry. When they had left him, they were still a little high, but everything seemed fine. Hearing my description of Henry worried him. Henry stayed in this altered state for a few days. It seemed he had slipped from a mescaline high to a more permanent altered state. I was confused. What could this be? I later learned that this was his first manic episode. It's unnerving to watch someone in the full throes of a manic episode. Henry's hair was an oily, tangled mess as he had not showered or slept in 48 hours. He wore the same clothes for days, and his eyes were the size of saucers. His voice was high-pitched. Watching him, it seemed like he was experiencing everything for the first time. He would finish a sentence with another sentence, like his brain was sprinting, but his mouth was jogging. And what was coming out made no sense. His ideas were hard to follow at a normal pace. At a full sprint, impossible. I had never seen anything like it. It's like watching your favorite movie, but the characters are speaking Japanese and moving backward. You are seeing it and hearing it and utterly unable to process what's going on, though you feel certain that you should know because it is your favorite movie. Throw in that this is happening to your son and your own lostness is multiplied. Nothing made sense to me, yet everything seemed to make sense to Henry. He thought he had unlocked the answers to the universe, ready for whatever came his way. This person talking to me looked like Henry, but it wasn't Henry. It was beyond unnerving. Watching your son fully awake and spouting nonsensical garbage is a waking nightmare. So that's one little piece.
Right. One little piece on a really long journey, with many pieces. And the book, which I didn't share in totality at the beginning, the book is about your journey and Henry's journey with bipolar disorder. And it's deeply personal and very, very tragic. And I'm curious how did you decide to share your story,
Right.
Henry's story, with the world?
Well, it's interesting. So I tell this story often. It's what affected. I read it's not really a poem. It's called a poem, but it's between Kurt Vonnegut and Joe Heller. Joe wrote Catch 22, and Kurt Vonnegut wrote Fahrenheit 451. And they're at a party at a hedge fund mogul's house. I was a billionaire, multi-billionaire. And Kurt Vonnegut goes to Joe Heller, Joe, do you realize this guy made more yesterday than you made your entire career in Catch 22? And Joe Heller goes, well, that may be true, Kurt, but I have something he doesn't have. And Kurt goes, Joe, what do you have that he doesn't have? And Joe Heller goes, well, I have enough. And I was fascinated by that notion of enough. And I thought I could write a book about enough using my son's tragedy, really, his illness and his ultimate death, and interweave them. So I started that way. And like any good book, it took the path it wanted to take, which was not at all anything business related. And it became a catharsis, really, a way of me of working out my issues around how I was complicit, perhaps, or sort of my journey of dealing with my son's disease and dealing with his ultimate death. And so it really became a way for me to tell our story in a way that was helpful to me, first and foremost. And as I started writing it and I started really going through the exercise, it was incredibly cathartic for me, and it ended up being helpful to others. But it was written purely selfishly to help me work through my issues, number one, and number two, to show the world the hero that both Heidi is and Henry was. So it's a way for me to own a story that other people really have no idea about. So that's how it came about.
Yeah, that's you like feel that when you're reading it, kind of this like push and pull between wanting to be a father, but also looking at your child who doesn't see who's not themselves, which creates distance.
Right.
It's kind of all happening at the same time, and that seems to be like a lot of like a common theme with some of the other parents of young people in our
Yeah.
clinic, is like it's simultaneously being so close but then so far away.
Right. It's like living in, Never Never Land. It's the interesting thing is, first of all, when you deal with mental illness, which comes with a stigma that's so unjustified, and so unwarranted, you tell someone your son has cancer and they're showing up with casseroles. You tell your friend, you tell someone your son has bipolar disorder, and they don't show up at all.
Yeah.
And it's societal in that respect, but it's also, because it's a disease, it's interesting on how much you're willing to share, because it's not your journey. It was Henry's journey. And so is it really my place to sort of intrude into his journey, which is a difficult thing for parents to get their hands around, because while it's Henry's journey, and as you all know, it's the family's journey as well. And so you're caught in this no man's land, given the fact that society is so judgmental. You're just caught. And so, it's one of the things that was a lifesaver to me, which you guys know, is finding that community where you can talk, where people will understand, where there's some commonality. While not everyone's story is the same, everyone's story is the same. And so it's that commonality and that bonding you can do with others because if you can't release it, it will eat you from the inside out. It's no fun. So, it's really difficult, and having a community to talk to is hugely important, and it's hard to find.
Yeah. You unfortunately capture that feeling of being stuck and being uncertain of how much to share and what to share with whom. You captured that time and time again throughout the book, which is really striking and also heartbreaking to read. And I think it screams of stigma, it screams of confusion and of fear, right? Fear that I think these young people have in experiencing symptoms of psychosis, and the fear we as caregivers, friends, family, parents have in being witness to it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's it's hard. I mean, it's hard on everybody, right? It's just hard. I mean, you want to think it's not, but some people have a little easier road than others.
Mhm.
And but your heart goes out to the people who are struggling with it, both the patient and the family, because they're just different kinds of struggles. And as you go through it and people are witnessing it, and a lot of times it's not just the mental illness, it's the drugs that they might take to mask their pain, and all the different ways that they might act out. And so people are more than willing to give you advice on how to raise a child, what to do. And it's rough when they do that, to be honest. But I like to equate it to a fighter pilot who, if you talk to fighter pilots who are going up in these huge jets, no matter what happens in a jet, it's always pilot error, according to them. And so, the wings could both fall off and the engines all fall off, but yet it's pilot error. And if you think about it, it's a survival mechanism, right? It's what they need to do to go up in that plane. And I think parents, God bless them, would like to think that if they're a good parent, this won't happen to them. But, that's a fallacy, because this happens to all parents, good and bad. And has nothing to do, I mean, I have 2 other children. They're fine, raised by the same parents. So it's just it's just difficult. And I have empathy for all parents going through it. I don't know what it's like to personally experience it, because I didn't suffer from bipolar disorder. I just know what it was like from the outside. And and then all the parents saying, well, you need to be tough love. I love that concept of tough love. I think that's a ridiculous notion, to be honest with you. I don't think anyone ever exercises tough love. My belief is you just get so exhausted that you have nothing left.
Right.
And you just
no one says
nothing
have
left.
tough love if your kid has chest pain.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I've actually never said out loud, and I don't know why I feel compelled to say it now, but that after he died and y'all reached out to Serena, and I had been his doctor at one point, inpatient. And when it happened, I immediately felt guilty, and I
Right.
felt like we didn't do what we needed to do, and we lost him. And, were we doctoring good enough? Were we like doing therapy?
Right.
Were we doing all these things? So, and when you reached out, I was like, not shocked, but like, it just like struck me that like
Yeah.
we were kind of doing this together, and that
Yeah. I mean, it was everyone's loss, right?
yeah.
It's not just our loss. And so, one of the things and through the book, I'm pretty hard on myself in the book, and it's very extremely vulnerable in the book. But I come to the end, and I think the point I try to make, and the point I would tell you, is that 2 things can be true. You can do the best you can, and it cannot be good enough. So
Right.
2 things can be true at the same time. You can do everything that you can do in your power to do, and it's just not enough. So, you can't help, especially in the profession you're in as a doctor, being a parent, everyone will say, well, there's nothing more you could have done. And that intellectually is true.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, it's definitely true. Emotionally, it just doesn't register. And so, you just have to wrap your head around the fact that it's a horrible loss and you did the best you could, it's just at the end of the day, that's all we can do is the best we can do. And, there's my therapist gave me a great analogy of I'm standing on my father's shoulders. My father is 6 feet tall. She isn't, but for sake of this, he's 6 feet tall. We Friedlers like to think we're tall, but he's 6 feet tall and he's in front of a brick wall that's 8 feet tall. And I'm on his shoulders and I'm looking out over this beautiful field, right? And I look down and I go, how come you never told me about this? And he goes, he can't see it, right? And so sometimes we fault people where they have literally no ability to do anything. And so we all come to the world with our own histories and our own versions of everything and our own stories. And that's how we build our future stories. And we only grow through events like this. And so there's nothing about what happened to me is good, right? Nothing. I mean, if I could wave a magic wand, I wish he had never gotten sick. And I certainly wish he had never died.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, because I can't wave that wand, what came out of it is an incredible growth for me and an incredible ability to see the world differently and to be a little more empathetic and to be a little more compassionate and to be a better person. And for that, I am grateful, though, I wish it had never happened.
Right. Well, that's exactly the simultaneous having two things that exist,
Right.
that can exist at
Right.
once.
I mean, the greatest book, if people haven't read it, it's a great book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I mean, my God, if that guy can be optimistic, anyone should be able to be optimistic. I mean, what happened to him is truly heartbreaking. And so we all want to think that we can take what life throws at us, but none of us want to get it thrown at us like it got thrown at Viktor Frankl, or quite honestly, like it got thrown at Heidi and I.
Yeah.
But you don't get to choose, right? I mean, you don't get to choose. And so my heart goes out for people who are experiencing this now, because it's rough. It is rough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It doesn't have to end the way mine ended, but no matter how it ends, and hopefully it never ends, it's still rough. It's not fun.
Yeah, and I think people want though to make sense of it and to blame, and no matter what, because it's just it's like too painful to think about it
Tolerate.
either way.
Right. Well, it's way easier to blame other people. So
Right.
it's blame. I always think blame is sort of a useless emotion. It doesn't help at all. It's not helpful in any stretch of the imagination, but it's the first thing that pops up. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. You said a couple things I just wanted to circle back to. One, you talked about doing the best you can and how, y'all did the best you can. We, the other providers in Henry's life, did the best they could, and he did the best he could, right? He engaged, he tried, the best is the best, and we work hard, and just the reality that it isn't enough, but trying to remind people that others are doing their best, even if that doesn't seem obvious from the outside. And then the other thing you said before is it's, in the individual who's struggling, it's their challenge, it's the family's challenge, and it's everyone's challenge, it's society's challenge. And I think you capture that so well in the Whole Foods chapter, which I think resonates probably loudly for a lot of people, and for those of us who could visualize that in New Orleans in particular. I think that speaks to the reason that we have calm, right? Clear answers to Louisiana mental health, and our attempts to intervene early, detect psychosis early, and destigmatize, because this one illness in these young people has a ripple effect that is strong and devastating and destructive.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I pass somebody, talking to themselves or on the street and clearly in some form of psychosis, my first thought goes to Henry. And but for the grace of God, and so, it's just so harsh to judge. And really, there's no win in that anyway. I mean, have a little empathy for where these people came from and what their lives were like. And, they, for the most part, they're not choosing this. It'd be like having cancer and having nobody willing to treat you. I mean,
or no one even to acknowledge that that there's pain, or there's confusion, or there's lost time with people that you love, or lost time in school or in work. And it's I think that Serena and I talk a lot about, we talk a lot about stigma and talk a lot about empathy, and then that there's this super strong relationship between them, because I think people don't want to step into the shoes of someone that might be going through this. Like, it's too weird, it's too scary, or it's your own who knows, maybe somebody has their own difficult experience with someone in their life that might have had schizophrenia or bipolar, and so it's just too much memories. But that it's I think that when society thinks about bipolar disorder, thinks about schizophrenia, thinks about someone that's psychotic, the image that automatically pops in their head is so far from, like, Henry.
Right.
And
so far from reality.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it's, life is hard regardless, right? Life is just hard. I mean, anyone whose life is not hard, I envy them, but life is hard. I mean, every day you wake up and you do the best you can and you try to move forward. And then when you're confronted with something that's different, right? We like to say, human nature to say, well, that's them, not me, right? And it's just it's other than. And so it makes our life a little more manageable if we can do that. It's and look, to be fair, if I see someone babbling and talking to themselves and coming up to me, I'm not going up and giving them a hug, right? I mean, I don't want to get into their personal space, but I'm also have empathy, right? I'm like, man, this is where society really let this person down. Because one of the interesting things that I'll never forget, I think it was Serena, you told it to me, but it's every time you go through psychosis, it's like being in a car accident, right? And you hit your head, and it's just, it's a definite injury. And so the more that happens to you, at some point, it becomes a little unrecoverable, right? Which is why what you guys are doing is so great, because if you can catch that early and catch that in a kid or even a young adult, and make it only once or twice, that's a huge difference in that person's life. And everybody deserves that, quite honestly. And what frustrates me is that, we had, if you read the book, I mean, I have resources, I am not without resources. And we have a little saying in our family, it's sort of a joke, but if you have the money for the solution, you don't have a problem. Now, if you don't want to spend it, that's on you. But money for the solution, you don't have a problem. But some problems, there is no money for the solution. And believe me, we tried putting money towards this solution. It's just, there's, at the end of the day, it's not a money problem. It's a societal problem that society has to be willing to embrace these kids really while they're kids, and be willing to do something, try something different to give them a chance at a decent life. Because when you see those 40-year-olds on the street talking themselves, those are people who at 20 never had a chance.
Right, exactly. And it kind of, not to get on the soapbox, but you mentioned like other than, and it's such like an othering type of thing
Yeah.
that happens. And with everything that's happening now in the world with like equity, diversity, inclusion, and this like spirit of that, I can't help but think about this marginalized group of people that spans the whole globe, the whole planet, and somehow this hasn't been just integral to that to that conversation. And
Right.
it's about they're people, they're humans or people.
And
Yeah,
you and I.
Doesn't matter
there's somebody,
where they're from.
there's
Doesn't
somebody's child, or
Right.
somebody's husband, and somebody's, it's somebody's baby. And so, it's really, really tough. But then again, have some empathy. I try to have empathy for others and understand that, they just don't know. And that's one of the reasons why when you read, that's one of the frustrations when I have people I know well who say, well, they don't want to read the book because it's too painful. Well, no shit. Excuse my language.
No.
Think about living through it, right?
Right.
And just because you don't read it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
And
it's not going to happen again.
yeah, and so it, I get it on one hand, but not really. And so, look, if you won't even spend 7.5 hours, because that's how long the Audible is. So if you won't even spend 7.5 hours in my shoes, 7.5 hours, I'm not asking you to spend the 8 years I spent in my shoes, 7.5 hours to gain a little insight into what it might be like, God bless you.
Yeah.
God bless you. Because you're never gonna evolve into the person that you could be.
Well, that I think is a fair place to wrap this up. And I think the call to action is to read the book, spend the 7.5 hours.
Yeah, like you can, you might get to choose to avoid this in a lot of aspects of life, or not you directly, but anyone can avoid it. But even the 7.5 hours to like of facing reality,
Right.
that you could then maybe be maybe you could be more compassionate towards your friend. Like no one's asking you to go and change the law and change that. Like we're asking you to asking you to do like a little bit.
Right.
We have a saying, ignorance is bliss.
Right. Well,
it truly is. Right. So if you want to live a blissful life, be ignorant. But if you want to live a meaningful life, you want to live a life worth living, be curious.
Absolutely.
Thank
you.
Cool. Well, we're so happy that you were here and that we're still a part of your life.
Well, you'll always be a part of my life. You guys are doing God's work, and I just can't speak. I speak about you often and loudly.
Oh. Well, we appreciate you. And I often think about how lucky we are that you still, that we're still part of your circle. Because I imagine there is value in that. There's also pain in that. And
but there's pain in a lot of things. I don't feel an ounce of pain anytime I'm around y'all. It's nothing but good. It's nothing but good memories. I think about Henry every day, all day, 24 hours a day. When I think about y'all, I think of the good things about Henry. I don't think of the bad things. So, that's the other thing I could leave you with is that if you if this ever happens, if you ever have a friend or a loved one or anyone who goes through what we had to go through, just understand that that if you bring it up to them, they're thinking about it anyway. So you don't have to worry about
bothering them,
breaking the ice.
You don't have to worry about bringing up a subject that might make them upset. Trust me. You know, they might be upset. They might cry, you know, but one of the things that I talk about a lot, which I believe is in life in general, is you just got to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And, you know, you guys do it for a living, but you just have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's what your friends want. That's what they need.
Yeah.
That's the greatest gift you can give them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Soon.
Until next time, thanks for taking the time to get your reality check. And remember, psychosis is real, so is recovery.
If you have enjoyed this episode or found it useful, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from and check out the website calmnola.org.